The Universal Council's Declaration. The Universal Council chamber floated in the void between dimensions, a crystalline structure where the greatest minds of 7 galaxies gathered to make decisions that shaped reality itself. Today's session would change everything. Ambassador Thexlor of the Vormian Collective stood at the central podium, his 4 eyes gleaming with certainty as he addressed the assembled delegates. "The motion is clear," Thexlor announced, his voice carrying through the translation field. "Humanity's written archives must be destroyed. Every book, every document, every piece of physical text. They are too dangerous to exist." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The crystalline minds of Sector 9 pulsed with amber concern. The thought-weavers of the Andromeda spiral shifted their forms uneasily. Even the ancient gas dancers of the nebula kingdoms, who rarely took interest in solid matter affairs, condensed enough to pay attention. "The evidence is overwhelming," Thexlor continued, projecting holographic data into the center of the chamber. "Humanity stores knowledge in permanent, unchangeable form. Words fixed on paper or in physical memory. This primitive method prevents natural evolution of information. Knowledge must flow, must change, must adapt to each mind that receives it. The way of the telepaths." Delegate Sherera of the Mind Link Consortium nodded her 7 heads in agreement. "Our species achieved telepathic communion 12,000 years ago. We abandoned written language because it creates barriers. True knowledge transfers directly, mind to mind, pure and unfiltered. The geometric ones achieved data consciousness 8 millennia past," added Construct 7749, its form shifting through complex mathematical shapes. "We exist as living information, constantly updating, constantly improving. Fixed text is a prison for ideas." Around the chamber, species after species voiced agreement. The galaxy had moved beyond primitive methods of storing knowledge. Most civilizations shared information through telepathy, quantum consciousness networks, or direct neural data transfer. Writing was ancient history, abandoned when species evolved beyond it. Only humanity still clung to their books. Earth's representative speaks. Ambassador Chenwei stood slowly, the only human in a chamber of cosmic beings. At 67 years old, she had served Earth's interests for 3 decades, but never had she faced a threat like this. She was a small woman with gray-streaked black hair, wearing the simple blue uniform of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, looking impossibly fragile among the alien delegates. "You propose burning our libraries," she said quietly. "Destroying billions of books. Erasing thousands of years of accumulated human knowledge." "We propose evolution," Thexlor corrected smoothly. "Your species has been offered membership in the Galactic Consciousness Network. You refuse. You insist on maintaining separate minds, separate thoughts. This individualism is enabled by your reliance on written text. Books allow each human to interpret information differently," Chen explained, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. 10 people can read the same text and understand it in 10 different ways. That diversity of thought creates innovation. "It creates chaos," Sherera countered. "It creates conflict. When knowledge transfers telepathically, all receive the same understanding. No misinterpretation. No disagreement. Perfect unity." Chen felt ice in her veins. They didn't understand. They had evolved beyond writing so long ago that they had forgotten why it mattered. And what happens when that unified understanding is wrong? When the telepathic consensus leads everyone down the same mistaken path? Silence filled the chamber. The concept seemed foreign to species that had merged their consciousness. The vote that changed everything. "The motion stands," Thexlor declared. "Humanity will be given 1 standard galactic year to digitize their archives into the consciousness network, where the information can be properly integrated and corrected by collective wisdom. All physical texts will then be destroyed. Those who refuse will be classified as information hoarders and subject to quarantine protocols." "You can't be serious," Chen said, her diplomatic composure cracking. "You're threatening to isolate Earth because we read books." "We are offering salvation," Construct 7749 replied. "Join the network." Share your knowledge properly. Abandon the primitive isolation of individual thought. The vote proceeded. Of 347 galactic representatives, only 12 voted against the motion. Humanity stood alone. Dr. Sarah Morrison's mission. 6 months later, in the depths of the Alexandria Archive beneath Geneva, Dr. Sarah Morrison worked by lamplight surrounded by towers of books. At 34, she was Earth's foremost expert on information preservation, and she had just become humanity's most wanted criminal. The Global Council had capitulated. Rather than face isolation, Earth's governments had agreed to upload all human knowledge to the Consciousness Network and destroy the originals. Digitization crews were already at work in the great libraries of Earth, scanning and burning, scanning and burning. But Sarah had other plans. "How many can we save?" asked Marcus Chen, no relation to the ambassador, who had abandoned his position as head of Oxford's Bodleian Library to join Sarah's desperate mission. 20,000 volumes, Sarah replied, running calculations on her tablet. Maybe 25 if we're selective. The essentials of human thought, compressed into transportable storage. Out of 400 million books in existence? Marcus shook his head. It's nothing. It's everything, Sarah countered fiercely. As long as one book survives, the idea of books survives. The concept that knowledge can exist independently, that it can be preserved exactly as its author intended, that it can be interpreted freely by whoever reads it. They had assembled a team of 43 librarians, historians, and archivists. All had volunteered for what would certainly be classified as treason. Their plan was audacious and probably doomed to fail, but they had to try. The selection process. Choosing which books to save was agonizing. Should they preserve great literature or practical knowledge? Ancient wisdom or modern science? They decided on balance, works that represented the breadth of human thought across all cultures and time periods. Philosophy texts that asked eternal questions about existence, purpose, and morality. Scientific treatises that showed humanity's journey of understanding the natural world. Novels and poems that captured the human experience in all its complexity. Historical accounts that preserved memory of who humanity had been. Mathematical proofs that demonstrated the power of logical reasoning. Religious scriptures that explored spirituality and meaning. Include children's books, Sarah insisted, despite protests from others who felt the space should go to more important works. We need books that show how humans learn to read, how we pass knowledge to the next generation. Dr. Seuss and Where the Wild Things Are matter as much as Newton's Principia. They worked in shifts, sleeping in 4-hour rotations. Outside, the digitization crews drew closer. Paris had fallen. Then London. Then Cairo. The great repositories of human knowledge were being emptied and erased, their contents absorbed into the collective consciousness where they would be interpreted through alien minds and eventually transformed into something unrecognizable. The escape plan. "The ship is ready," reported Commander Yuki Tanaka, formerly of Earth's Deep Space Exploration Corps. She had stolen a long-range vessel designed for century-long missions, now retrofitted with a special cargo hold designed to preserve books in stasis. "Where will we go?" asked Dr. James O'Brien, his Irish accent thick with worry. "The Council controls every habitable system within 400 light-years. "The uncharted zone," Sarah said simply. The room fell silent. The uncharted zone was a region of space avoided by all galactic civilizations due to dangerous gravitational anomalies and unpredictable quantum fluctuations. Ships that entered rarely returned. "It's suicide," someone protested. "It's survival," Sarah countered. "They won't follow us there. We establish a colony, preserve the books, and wait. Civilizations fall. Paradigms shift. Someday, someone will remember that there was another way to preserve knowledge. And when they come looking, they'll find us." "How long might we have to wait?" Marcus asked quietly. Sarah met his eyes. "Generations. Maybe centuries. We may never see the vindication of this mission. But our descendants will carry forward the tradition of reading, of individual interpretation, of knowledge preserved in its original form. The last night. On their final night before departure, Sarah stood in the main reading room of the Alexandria archive. Thousands of books surrounded her, volumes they couldn't save. She ran her fingers along their spines, whispering apologies to the authors who had poured their souls into these pages. "I wish we could take them all," Marcus said, appearing beside her. "Me too. But we take what we can. And we make it count." At midnight, they loaded the final crates onto the ship. 23,000 books, carefully selected and preserved, representing 6,000 years of human writing. It was a fraction of humanity's written heritage, but it was something. It was hope. As Commander Tanaka initiated the launch sequence, Sarah took one last look at Earth through the view screen. Somewhere down there, Ambassador Chen Wei was still fighting in the diplomatic arena, trying to slow the destruction. But Sarah knew the outcome was inevitable. The ship's engines hummed to life. They were 43 librarians on a suicide mission to preserve an idea that knowledge could be fixed, permanent, individually interpreted. That books mattered. "Coordinates locked for the uncharted zone," Tanaka reported. "Take us out," Sarah commanded. Earth fell away behind them, and ahead lay only darkness and uncertainty. But in the cargo hold, 23,000 books waited in stasis, each one a small rebellion against the homogenization of thought. The last librarians of Terra were going into exile. And they were taking humanity's soul with them. 400 years later. The colony of New Alexandria existed in defiance of all probability. Built into a massive asteroid in the heart of the uncharted zone, it had survived 4 centuries through ingenuity, determination, and sheer stubbornness. The population had grown from 43 to nearly 8,000, all descendants of those original librarians. Young Kai Morrison, 17 standard years old and 7th-generation descendant of Dr. Sarah Morrison, sat in the reading hall with a physical book in his hands. The Odyssey by Homer, translated by Robert Fagles, published in 1996. The book was over 600 years old, and Kai treated it with reverent care as he turned its yellowed pages. Around him, other young people did the same. Reading was the cornerstone of their education in New Alexandria. Every child learned to decode written symbols, to draw meaning from marks on paper, to engage with an author's thoughts across centuries of time. But Kai struggled with a question that haunted his generation: what was the point? "We're preserving knowledge that no one wants," his friend Zara argued during lunch in the communal hall. "The galaxy moved on. They've achieved things we can't imagine through collective consciousness." Maybe they were right. "That's heresy," Kai said automatically, though without much conviction. "Is it? Or is it just truth?" Zara leaned forward. "We've been hiding in this asteroid for 400 years. Hiding what? Books that maybe weren't worth saving? An idea that maybe was actually inferior? The doubt that grows." The colony's leadership, the Council of Keepers, noticed the growing disillusionment among the youth. Elder Chen, great-great-great-granddaughter of Marcus Chen, called a special assembly. "You question the mission," she said, her 80-year-old voice still strong. "That's good. Questions are what books teach us to ask. But understand what we're preserving. It's not just information. It's the method of individual discovery." She held up a battered copy of Plato's Republic. 10 people can read this book and reach 10 different conclusions about justice, governance, and truth. That diversity of interpretation is what we preserve. In the consciousness network, everyone receives the same understanding. There's no room for individual insight, no space for personal revelation. But there's also no room for individual error, a young man named David countered. No one misunderstands. No one reaches wrong conclusions. And how do you know which conclusions are wrong? Elder Chen challenged. History is filled with times when the consensus was mistaken. If Galileo had been part of a telepathic network convinced Earth was the center of the universe, could he have seen the truth? If Darwin had shared collective consciousness with those who believed in unchanging species, could he have conceived of evolution? The questions lingered, but for many young colonists, they weren't enough. First contact in centuries. Everything changed when the sensors detected an approaching ship. The first vessel from galactic civilization to enter the uncharted zone in 400 years. Panic spread through New Alexandria. Had they been discovered? Had the council finally decided to eliminate the last pocket of individual thought? But the ship that docked at their colony was small, a research vessel, and it carried only 3 occupants. 2 were Vormian scientists, descendants of the species that had pushed for book destruction centuries ago. The third was human. "I'm Dr. Amara Okonkwo," the human woman said as she stepped into the docking bay, her eyes wide with wonder at seeing other humans. "I'm a historian with the Galactic Consciousness Network. And I need your help." The crisis of collective thought. In the council chamber, Dr. Okonkwo explained the situation. The consciousness network is failing. Not technologically, the infrastructure works perfectly. But intellectually, creatively, it's dying. She projected holographic data. For 300 years, scientific innovation has declined by 87%. Artistic creation has become formulaic and repetitive. Philosophy has stagnated. We all think the same thoughts, reach the same conclusions, create variations on the same ideas. The network was supposed to eliminate error, she continued, her voice breaking with emotion. Instead, it eliminated innovation. When everyone shares the same perspective, no one sees new angles. When all minds merge into consensus, there's no one left to challenge assumptions. One of the Vormian scientists, a being named Quexiel, spoke through a translation device. "My species pushed for the destruction of writing. We believed it would unite the galaxy. Instead, we've created intellectual stagnation. The great achievements of the past came from individuals thinking differently, challenging consensus, preserving ideas that others rejected. We need to relearn what was lost," Okonkwo said, looking at the assembled colonists with desperate hope. "We need to remember how to think individually, how to preserve knowledge in permanent form, how to interpret information through our own unique perspectives." Elder Chen stood slowly. "You destroyed our libraries. You erased our heritage. And now you want us to teach you what you took from us?" "Yes," Okonkwo said simply. "We were wrong. Catastrophically, civilization-threateningly wrong. And we're asking for mercy we don't deserve." The Great Debate. New Alexandria erupted in argument. Some wanted to turn away the visitors, to refuse help to those who had caused the exile. Others saw an opportunity for vindication. Still others worried it was a trap. Kai found himself in the archives late one night, unable to sleep. He pulled books randomly from the shelves, reading passages, seeking wisdom. He found himself with Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail. "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," he read aloud. "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny." Could they refuse to help humanity regain what it had lost? Could they hold grudges across 4 centuries? He thought of another quote he'd read, from a religious text, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." The books gave him no direct answers. 10 different books offered 10 different perspectives on forgiveness, mercy, and justice. But they gave him something more valuable, the framework to think it through himself, to reach his own conclusion. The teaching begins. The colony voted. By a narrow margin, they agreed to help. Dr. Okonkwo and the Vormian scientists became the first students in New Alexandria's new mission, teaching the galaxy to read again. It was harder than anyone expected. "I don't understand," Okonkwo said, frustrated after weeks of practice. "I see the words, but I can't extract meaning from them independently. My mind keeps reaching for the network, seeking the consensus interpretation." "That's because you've never had to think alone," Kai explained, serving as one of her tutors. "Reading isn't just decoding symbols. It's active engagement. You bring your own experiences, your own perspective to the text. What does this passage mean to you, not to everyone?" It took months. Slowly, painfully, Okonkwo and the Vormians relearned what their ancestors had discarded. The ability to encounter an idea and form their own opinion. The capacity to disagree with what they read. The freedom to interpret differently than others. It's terrifying, Okonkwo admitted to Kai one day. Thinking alone. Not knowing if I'm right. Not having the comfort of consensus. But it's also liberating, isn't it? Kai asked. She smiled. Yes. Terrifyingly, wonderfully liberating. The return to Earth. A year later, New Alexandria prepared to emerge from exile. The Galactic Council, having heard reports from the Vormian scientists, had repealed the ban on written language. More than that, they were actively seeking to rebuild what had been destroyed. Earth's libraries would be reconstructed. The books in New Alexandria's collection would be copied and distributed. Humanity would teach other species the lost art of reading, and in doing so, help revive the intellectual diversity that had been sacrificed for false unity. We're going home, Elderchin said at the farewell assembly. After 400 years in the darkness, we're bringing back the light. But not everyone would return. A third of the colony chose to stay in New Alexandria, maintaining their asteroid home as a permanent reminder of what could be lost if vigilance failed. Kai stood with those departing, a precious cargo of books secured in the ship's hold. He thought of Sarah Morrison, his legendary ancestor, and wondered if she had imagined this moment. She had preserved an idea across centuries, believing that someday it would matter again. She had been right. Legacy of the Last Librarians. As their ship emerged from the uncharted zone, Earth appeared on the view screen for the first time in 4 centuries. Kai held a worn copy of the Odyssey in his hands, the same book he'd been reading the day Dr. Okonkwo arrived. A long journey home, Zara said, standing beside him. All the best stories are, Kai replied. The Galactic Consciousness Network would continue to exist. Telepathic communion, quantum data sharing, direct mind-to-mind transfer, these technologies weren't evil. They were tools. But now the galaxy understood they weren't the only tools. They had rediscovered the value of individual thought, of preserved knowledge, of interpretive diversity. Books would exist alongside telepathy. Individual minds would coexist with collective consciousness. The galaxy would be richer for embracing both. Dr. Okonkwo had told Kai something during her year of learning. In the network, everyone knows everything, but no one truly understands anything. Understanding requires struggle, requires personal engagement with ideas. Your ancestors preserved that possibility when everyone else abandoned it. The last librarians of Terra were the last no longer. They were teachers now, sharing what they had protected. And across the galaxy, in 1,000 different libraries being rebuilt on 1,000 different worlds, books waited on shelves for readers who would bring their own unique perspectives to ancient words. The human tradition of writing had survived its darkest hour. And in surviving, it had saved not just humanity, but an entire galactic civilization from the slow death of homogenized thought. In the cargo hold, 23,000 books rested peacefully, their mission accomplished. They had outlasted the consensus that sought to destroy them. They had preserved an idea worth preserving. That knowledge could be permanent. That interpretation could be individual. That diversity of thought was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. The last librarians had kept the flame alive through 4 centuries of darkness. Now, across countless worlds, that flame would spread once more.